Είναι προφανές ότι υπάρχουν προορισμοί και περιοχές οι οποίες δέχονται μια πολύ μεγάλη επιβάρυνση από την επισκεψιμότητα, τη μεγάλη επισκεψιμότητα, και περιοχές οι οποίες δεν θα αντέξουν για πάρα πολύ καιρό ακόμα αυτή την επιβάρυνση. Πρέπει λοιπόν σε πρώτη φάση, συντεταγμένα και με επιστημονικά στοιχεία και με συγκεκριμένα δεδομένα, να δούμε πού βρισκόμαστε σήμερα, να κάνουμε μια καταγραφή της κατάστασης, και αυτό η BRD το κάνει εξαιρετικά καλά, και φυσικά να προταθούν και ορισμένα μέτρα που ύστερα από διάλογο και συζήτηση με την τοπική κοινωνία και προφανώς και με όλους τους φορείς που ασχολούνται με τον τουρισμό και με τον ιδιωτικό τομέα, να εφαρμόσουμε έστω αρχικά κάποια από αυτά. Κατά συνέπεια, περιμένω με πολύ μεγάλη ανυπομονησία να δω τα στοιχεία της BRD και να γίνει και μια συζήτηση ενδεχομένως, κύριε Πρόεδρε, για το τι θα έπρεπε να κάνουμε και στον Ομοχανίων, στην Κρήτη και στην Ελλάδα συνολικά. Ευχαριστώ και πάλι για την πρόσκληση, να είστε καλά και εδώ είμαστε να το συζητήσουμε.
Ευχαριστήσω πάρα πολύ τον γραμματέα μας, τον κύριο Φραγκάκη, να καλέσω για σύντομο χαιρετισμό τον υπεύθυνο τουρισμού Κρήτης, τον κύριο Κοτσόπουλο.
Ανεβαίνει και κατεβαίνει το μικρόφωνο. Να σας ευχαριστήσω και εγώ για την πρόσκληση, αγαπητέ Πρόεδρε, Γραμματέα, όλο το Διοικητικό Συμβούλιο. Η αλήθεια είναι ότι ανάμεσα σε αυτό που ο Πρόεδρος είπε, τη συνεισφορά του ιδιωτικού και του δημόσιου τομέα στο κομμάτι του τουρισμού και στις ιδιωτικές και δημόσιες επενδύσεις, δυστυχώς, παρότι εκπροσωπώ αυτή τη στιγμή το κομμάτι της περιφέρειας, δεν μπορώ παρά να παραδεχτώ ότι υπάρχει μια υστέρηση σε αυτό το κομμάτι, κυρίως σε σχέση με τις υποδομές. Η αλήθεια είναι όμως ότι το έχω ζήσει από παλαιότερα. Δεν έχουν περάσει πολλά χρόνια όπου το Αριστοτέλειο Πανεπιστήμιο Θεσσαλονίκης έκανε μια έρευνα, το δημοσιογραφικό του κομμάτι, η περιβαλλοντική δημοσιογραφία, όπου κλήθηκα εκεί ως Γενικός Διευθυντής του ξενοδοχειακού ομίλου Κανδέρα, σχεδόν να απολογηθώ για την περιβαλλοντική επιβάρυνση την οποία προκαλούσαν οι μεγάλες ξενοδοχειακές μονάδες. Όταν τους εξήγησα ακριβώς τι γίνεται από τις μεγάλες ξενοδοχειακές μονάδες, είχα τη δυνατότητα να διαπιστώσω ότι υπήρχε μια διαφορετική προσέγγιση. Στην πραγματικότητα, παρότι δεν δικαιούμαι από αυτό το βήμα να μιλάω για ιδιωτικό κομμάτι, έχοντας τα ξενοδοχεία της Καλδέρα δουλεύουν κάτω από την TUI και υποχρεούνται από την TUI σε συνεργασία να εφαρμόζουν ISO 14000 για το περιβάλλον, να εφαρμόζουν Golden Travel Life, και παράλληλα το σημαντικότερο είναι ότι πρέπει καθημερινά σε ένα πρόγραμμα software το οποίο έχει η συγκεκριμένη εταιρεία και λέγεται Agenda 2100 να καταχωρούμε τις καταναλώσεις σε νερό, ρεύμα και υγραέριο, έτσι ώστε να δίνουμε τη δυνατότητα σε αυτούς τους ανθρώπους να μετράνε την κατανάλωση per night, per person, διανυκτέρευση και ανά άτομο, σχετικά με το τι μπορεί να γίνει. Και όπως κάθε χρόνο ο tour operator δίνει μια σειρά πράγματα με τα οποία λέει τι ακριβώς θέλει, έτσι κάθε φορά το feedback του ήταν πώς θα καταφέρουμε να μειώσουμε, πώς δηλαδή η επιβάρυνση που θα προκαλεί ο μέσος επισκέπτης θα είναι μικρότερη ή θα δίνει αειφορία στον τόπο. Προτάσεις όπως πώς να μπουν delayers στα μπάνια, έτσι ώστε να πέσει η κατανάλωση σε λιγότερα λίτρα ανά λεπτό, προτάσεις πώς να μεγαλώσει η χρήση φυσικού αερίου ή υδραερίου που έχουμε εδώ, με σκοπό να μειωθεί η κατανάλωση σε ηλεκτρικό και μαζούτ, προτάσεις του πώς θα μπορούσε το περιβαλλοντικό αποτύπωμα να βελτιωθεί, μαζί με όλη τη διαδικασία που έχουμε για τη θαλάσσια χελώνα, τις ημερίδες που κάνουμε για να μαζέψουμε τα σκουπίδια και να καθαρίσουμε τις ακτές, τα συνεχή υπομνήματα που κάνει ο Σύλλογος Ξενοδοχειακός για τη βελτίωση των υποδομών. Μην έχετε την παραμικρή αίσθηση ότι ο Σύλλογος Ξενοδόχων ήταν αυτός ο οποίος σε πολύ μεγάλο βαθμό πέτυχε με τη βοήθεια της περιφέρειας το να αποκατασταθεί η γέφυρα του Πλατανιά σε χρόνο ρεκόρ. Έτσι λοιπόν θα έλεγα ότι πραγματικά χαίρομαι πάρα πολύ που από αυτό το βήμα βλέπω το Σύλλογο Ξενοδόχων να κάνει αυτό το βήμα προς το περιβαλλοντικό αποτύπωμα. Είναι αναγκαίο, είναι απαραίτητο για την αειφορία και δεν έχουμε να κατηγορηθούμε ότι θα καταστρέψουμε ακριβώς αυτό το οποίο μας δίνει. Η Κρήτη έχει απίστευτα μεγάλο περιβαλλοντικό αποτύπωμα, αλλά και αυτό εξαντλείται κάποια στιγμή. Θέλω να σας ευχαριστήσω πάρα πολύ για την πρόσκληση. Σπάνια έχω την ευκαιρία να ευχαριστώ, αλλά αυτή τη φορά θέλω από το βήμα αυτό να ευχαριστήσω τον Σύλλογο Ξενοδόχων του Νομού Χανίων και όλους τους παριστάμενους, γιατί έχει μια πολύ ισόρροπη λειτουργία ανάμεσα στην καθημερινότητα, από το πώς θα φύγει κάθε mail, μέχρι την διαχείριση και την ενασχόληση με τέτοιου είδους θέματα. Είναι μια χρονιά η οποία έχει πολύ μεγάλο ενδιαφέρον, μπορεί να εξελιχθεί πολύ κακά, μπορεί να εξελιχθεί πάρα πολύ καλά. Είναι μια πρόκληση χρονιά για μας, να ευχηθώ το καλύτερο στις ημερίδες, να χαιρετήσω τους προκεκλημένους και να ευχαριστήσω πάρα πολύ. Να είστε καλά.
Να ευχαριστήσω πολύ τον κύριο Κότσογλου, εντεταλμένος περιφερειακός σύμβουλος στον τομέα τουρισμού και ηλεκτρονικής διακυβέρνησης Κρήτης. Dear honorable guests, thank you very much for paying visit today to Chania. I'm switching to English to welcome you. Some of the speeches are going to be in Greek, some of the speeches are going to be in English, and we are very eager to listen to all the data that you are going to tell us today. Thank you.
Καλησπέρα από όλους. Ευχαριστούμε για την ευγενική πρόσκληση των Προέδρων της Ένωσης Ξενοδόχων Νομού Χανίων, κύριε Γενική Γραμματέα, εκπρόσωποι της Περιφέρειας και των Δήμων. Είναι χαρά μας σήμερα να βρισκόμαστε εδώ εκπρόσωποι από 3 εταιρείες, οι οποίες από τον Μάιο του 2018 έχουμε αναλάβει να υλοποιήσουμε ένα έργο το οποίο είναι αρκετά πρωτοποριακό για τα ελληνικά δεδομένα, την δημιουργία σχεδίων διαχείρισης προορισμών για ορισμένους από τους σημαντικότερους προορισμούς της χώρας. Ένα έργο το οποίο έχει διαρκέσει 6 μήνες και σήμερα είναι για μας ευκαιρία όχι μόνο να μοιραστούμε μαζί σας κάποια πρακτικά παραδείγματα από την εμπειρία που έχουμε αποκτήσει, αλλά ταυτόχρονα να συζητήσουμε και για τις προκλήσεις που μπορεί ένα τέτοιο έργο, εφόσον υπάρχουν κατάλληλες συνθήκες, να λάβει χώρα είτε στα Χανιά είτε και σε άλλους προορισμούς της Κρήτης. Στην ουσία πρόκειται για ένα workshop, γιατί ο στόχος μας είναι να μην έχουμε μόνο παρουσιάσεις, αλλά να υπάρξουν και κάποιες διαδραστικές ενότητες, στις οποίες θα υπάρξει ανταλλαγή απόψεων. Γι' αυτό και θεωρήστε ότι εξ τούτου θα υπάρχουν ενότητες και στα αγγλικά και στα ελληνικά. Θεωρήστε ότι αν κάποια στιγμή και μετά κάποιοι τεχνικοί όροι δεν είναι απόλυτα κατανοητοί ή οτιδήποτε άλλο, είμαστε στη διάθεσή σας για να διευκρινίσουμε οτιδήποτε κατά την πορεία των παρουσιάσεων. Λίγα λόγια για το έργο. Χρηματοδοτείται από την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση υπό την αιγίδα της Ευρωπαϊκής Τράπεζας Ανασυγκρότησης και Ανάπτυξης και πάντα με την ευγενική υποστήριξη του Υπουργείου Τουρισμού. Την υλοποίηση του έργου έχουν αναλάβει 3 εταιρείες, 2 από το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο και 1 από την Ελλάδα. Οι 2 εταιρείες από το Ηνωμένο Βασίλειο είναι η Team Consulting και η Yellow Railroad. Εκπρόσωποι τους είναι εδώ οι επικεφαλείς, ο κύριος Roger Carter και ο κύριος Tom Banco. Ενώ από το Tosophy, η Tosophy είναι ένα destination marketing agency που δραστηριοποιείται στην Ελλάδα εδώ και 1 δεκαετία, αλλά έχει και πολύ σημαντικές παρουσίες στο εξωτερικό. Και οι 3 αυτές, η κοινοπραξία των 3 αυτών εταιρεών ανέλαβε στις αρχές του Μαΐου να υλοποιήσει το έργο. Ταυτόχρονα είχαμε πάρα πολύ σημαντική υποστήριξη τόσο στην περίπτωση της Σαντορίνης από το επιμελητήριο Κυκλάδου, όσο και στην περίπτωση της Ρόδου από το επιμελητήριο των Δεκανήσων. Και ήταν πραγματικά εξαιρετικά σημαντικό το γεγονός ότι δραστηριοποιήσανε τους εκάστοτε τοπικούς φορείς του τουριστικού τομέα, αλλά και όπως εμείς συνηθίζουμε να λέμε της ευρύτερης οικονομίας των επισκεπτών, ώστε να συμμετέχουν στο διάλογο, να πάρουν μέρος στις online έρευνες που έλαβαν χώρα μετά τον πρώτο γύρο της διαβούλευσης και να μας τροφοδοτήσουν χρήσιμες κατευθύνσεις κατά την εκπόνηση των 2 σχεδίων. Παράλληλα, οφείλουμε να τονίσουμε και την πολύ σημαντική συνεργασία και υποστήριξη που προσέφερε στο έργο ο ΣΕΤΕ, τόσο μέσω της παροχής ερευνητικών δεδομένων, όσο και με την ενεργοποίηση των μελών του στις διαφορετικές περιοχές. And at this stage I'm switching to English in order to provide a word to Mr. Roger Carter, who will take you through the first part of our presentation today.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Kalispera. It's a huge pleasure to be with you here today and to tell you a little bit about the program of work that we have been undertaking over the summer period. This gives you the overall timetable, and during this period of time
we have produced a destination management plan for Rhodes, a destination management plan for Santorini, and then recently, within the last few weeks, a guide to help destinations elsewhere in Greece to produce destination management plans, learning from what we have done in Rhodes and Santorini. It's been challenging. The timescale that we were given and the deadline of 31st of October was absolute from the start. No possibility of extending. So we had to design our program to come within that timescale. So we had to produce those 3 documents within that period of time and to do all of the background work that was involved. And there was a lot of work involved in preparing a destination management plan. We want to give you an indication, the sort of types of work that are necessary when you're going to produce a plan, to give it a solid base of evidence. Really, if you're planning for the next 10 years for the development of tourism and the improvement of the destination over a 10-year period, you want it to be based on very good evidence. So we're going to talk you through that. But let me just take you through the timetable here. So we started in May and we had some of our preliminary discussions, and that's the point where we did desk research, which was gathering all available material. There's a lot of material already out there from different levels, from the local level, from the regional level, from the national level. So we need to gather all of that material. But on the one hand, this was data, but also a lot of reports that had been prepared about the development of tourism. We also took a global view, because whatever happens in Greece is influenced to a significant extent by what is happening globally. And there have been some major global trends in recent years which you'll be aware of, which we've had to take into account. But I'll touch on that in a minute, in the next slide. So we started off with the desk research, and actually the desk research continued for 2 or 3 months, but it was concentrated predominantly in the month of May, the first month. And then in June, we had the period when we were very actively involved in the 2 destinations of Rhodes and Santorini. This involved 2 main workshops where we were talking to all of the key stakeholders. But in addition to that, we had lots of individual discussions with key players, and also we travelled around the 2 islands so that we really understood the products and experiences that were available, and also by talking to people the sorts of issues that they were facing. And then based on that, we produced what we call the situation report, essentially looking at where we are now and gathering all of the material together to give the picture of tourism as it is now. But following on from the workshops, there was an important area that we needed to add, and that was getting the views and opinions of key groups. And those groups were the community, the tourism industry, tourism businesses, and also visitors who had been to each of the islands to understand about their experiences, their satisfactions, their motivations. And we will tell you more about those in a minute. Pantasis was really the brain behind all of that work. So that took place in July and extending into August, and there were more interviews also over that period with key stakeholders, and that included stakeholders both within the destination but also stakeholders outside the destination, people who had some degree of influence on what was happening in each of the destinations. So by the time we got to August, we had got all of that initial information gathering, the results of our own time on the islands, looking at around the islands, talking to people there, and then the survey work. And then we started to bring that together. These processes are all about, at the beginning, gathering lots of information in, and then processing the information in order to start to formulate conclusions about, in this case, how tourism should develop in each of the islands. And a starting point with that is to prepare a discussion paper, not to go into huge detail, but to start to look at the key issues and some of the ideas and the opportunities that are emerging to get the discussions going. So those papers were essentially for discussion with our client group in order to get their feedback on whether the issues we were identifying were really the right ones. And so with that as the base, during September we moved into the preparation of the destination management plans. Actually that started during August and really went right through September. And that's obviously where it really matters, when we start to formulate the plans for the destinations. And now, this month, we are presenting the results. Last week we were presenting in Rhodes and in Santorini. And now we're coming to present the guide. I should have said, at the same time as we were preparing the destination management plans, we were also preparing the guide for use by destinations elsewhere. So now we have the three documents, and we're presenting those last week in the two islands and this week here, and we have a final presentation in Athens tomorrow. In Athens we're talking to the national stakeholders, and it's one of the key things for us and for me is making sure we get the linkage between what happens within destinations and what's happening at the national level. They must be directly related. The national level needs to understand what's going on at the destination level in terms of development of products and experiences and priorities for marketing. But at the same time, the destinations need to understand the major trends that are happening out in the marketplace, and also, wherever possible, to participate in the national marketing activity. It makes sense to take advantage of that expenditure at the national level on marketing to come in behind it wherever it is suitable and relevant for the destination. So, as I say, we're now in the final stages, and as you'll see, completion, 31st of October, that's tomorrow. So hence our final presentation. That will be the formal conclusion. There will be a little bit more work in the sense that there will be translation of documents to be done. We hope that majority of documents will be available in Greek by the end of November. So that's the overall picture of the timetable. So our program is in two parts now. We're going to talk you through what we've done, and in particular talk you through the guide to destination management planning so that you will understand what's involved if you're going to prepare a destination management plan here. And then the second part we want to make as relevant and interesting to you as possible. So we'll be, at the end of this session, really trying to find out, of the topics we've raised, what would you like to know more about and what would you like to discuss? We're happy really to cover anything that's of interest to you. So we will make that second session as interactive as possible, and we'd like you very much to participate in that, to join in the discussion. I'm just going to come around here. The microphone seems to have disappeared. I'll just come around here so that I can see a little bit better. You want to do this? You're going to do this? Okay.
Εν συντομία, όπως είπε και ο Ρότζερ, θα έχουμε μια πρώτη ενότητα στην οποία θα ξεκινήσουμε με κάποιες βασικές ενότητες από τη δουλειά μας στην περίπτωση τόσο στη Ρόδος και στη Σαντορίνη. Έχουμε προσπαθήσει να βάλουμε κάποια πρακτικά παραδείγματα ώστε να είμαστε απόλυτα συνεπείς με την ανάγκη να γίνει κατανοητό το έργο, γιατί υπάρχουν περιπτώσεις στις οποίες μιλάμε για αρκετά τεχνικά στοιχεία. Παρ' όλα αυτά, στο δεύτερο μέρος, και επειδή έχουμε ήδη χρησιμοποιήσει ένα online εργαλείο το οποίο ήταν αρκετά πετυχημένο, ειδικά στη Ρόδο αλλά και στη Σαντορίνη σε μεγάλο βαθμό, ένα εργαλείο για live polling, θα σας ζητήσουμε να συνδεθείτε στο Wi-Fi της αίθουσας, ώστε να μπορέσετε να μας απαντήσετε δύο ερωτήσεις, οι οποίες θα μας βοηθήσουν να εντοπίσουμε τις πιο σημαντικές ενότητες ενός ενδεχόμενου, δυνητικού μάλλον, σχεδίου διαχείρισης του προορισμού στην περίπτωση των Χανίων. Και αφού καταλήξουμε στις προτεραιότητες αυτές, μετά θα μπορέσει να γίνει και μία συζήτηση, τόσο οι παρεμβάσεις ειδικές που μπορούν να γίνουν φυσικά είτε στα αγγλικά είτε στα ελληνικά, ανάλογα με το πώς επιθυμείτε.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about destination management planning generally, and the role of it and the value of it. So this is talking about the context, and I talked to you a moment ago about the global context and how important that was. Here are sort of some of the key points. Here's the microphone. So global tourism growth, I think you all know we've seen huge growth in global tourism market in recent years. It's only, 5 years ago that the World Tourism Organization was announcing 1 billion international arrivals in the year. Last year it was up to 1.4 billion. So it's a huge growth rate. A lot of that growth coming out of Asia. And that is relevant because the Asian markets have particular requirements. If we want to go for those markets, we need to understand the requirements and cater for those requirements. And indeed, within the Asian markets, there are quite different requirements from the different markets and the different segments within the market. So a lot of the engine for growth is in Asia. But the global growth is not just in terms of demand, but also in terms of supply. The capacity that is now available in different parts of the world is absolutely huge. Just hold on a moment. Thank you very much. Is that okay? Can you hear me? Yeah? Good. So we've seen huge growth in capacity around the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, and also in the Far East. So lots of countries there catering for the growth of the Chinese market in particular, where we've seen just absolutely massive growth over the last 15 to 20 years. So we've got, in one sense, good news in terms of the growth in demand, but we've also got more and more competitors, which takes us to the position that we really need to differentiate our offer. You always have to ask yourself the question, well, why should people come to my destination rather than all of the other destinations that are available to the markets around the world? And it's a really good point to start, just by asking yourselves that question. Why should people come here rather than to all of the competition? And what you don't want to be doing is selling on price, which some destinations do. You really need to sell on what's special to your destination. And a lot of that comes back to what's authentic about your destination. What are the special stories that you have to tell? And those special stories are rooted in the history and the culture of destinations. And more people are interested in that. Increasingly markets, whether it's coming through tour operators or coming individually, people are more and more wanting to learn about the destinations, to understand what's authentic about destinations, and to engage with local people. This is one of the things in Rhodes, where we were told early on that there are villages all around Rhodes that really are not seeing tourists at the moment. They're not benefiting from tourism, but they're really enthusiastic to be involved. And so we had discussions in the different communities about what they could do, how they could participate, helping them to understand what being involved in tourism is all about. So anyway, global tourism growth. Clearly tourism is a major employer throughout Greece generally, but also in Crete, certainly in the two islands where we were doing the detailed work. Big issues of sustainability arising. On the one hand, we like the sound of growth, but on the other hand, growth can cause problems, and you see that to varying degrees in different places. Santorini is a destination where the challenges of growth are particularly apparent. They are apparent in terms of the overall capacity of the island, but also the capacity of particular areas of the island where visitors they tend to go because, particularly for seeing the sunset, the town of Ia receives literally thousands of people every night, and the town really cannot accommodate the numbers. That takes you into the whole issue of visitor management. So we talk about destination management, and within that there's the management of visitors so that we can maximize their satisfaction at the same time as not impacting on the quality of life of residents. And ultimately it's all about benefits for the people of the island, for the economy of the island. So we want to make sure that whatever happens is sustainable in terms of the visitors, in terms of the tourism businesses, that they are sustainable, in terms of the community, that communities are comfortable with tourism, and also the physical environment. So in some places, and Santorini as an example, some of those elements are under threat. And more there are destinations now which are facing up to the challenge of sustainability. But there are ways of dealing with these things. I talked about visitor management. There's various techniques that can be used. And one of the things that we did in this work was to look at examples of other destinations around the world that had been addressing particular issues that we had come up against in the two islands. And I think those examples were very interesting. For example, the city of Ghent in Belgium and what that has done to create a car-free city centre, and the impact of that, the benefits that have arisen from that, and the growth in business for the traders that has resulted from that. Increasing focus on destination management. So going back 20 years, our primary interest was in destination marketing. But because of the growth, because of the challenges, we're now tending to look at management of the destination. And so the title Destination Management Plan gets over the fact that we are wanting to manage the destination to the benefit of the destination. And when we talk about destination management in that way, we're talking about development, management, and marketing of tourism. Those elements all come within the term destination management as defined by the World Tourism Organization. In the context of Greece, it's been very interesting over the course of our project to see announcements being made by various organizations, by the minister, by SETE, by GNTO, in terms of new policies, and the whole concept of attracting new and high yield markets, starting to target particular markets that we know will bring the greatest benefit to destinations and the individual areas within it. Another contextual factor, quite recently of course, is the collapse of Thomas Cook, which has had major repercussions all around Greece, as I'm sure you all know. And it's really just, I think, a moment when it gives us cause for thought about exactly how we want to work with tour operators in the future. Tour operators bring great benefits to destinations, but there are also challenges of over-dependence, and it's all a matter of balance, getting that right. Again, this is part of a destination management plan, getting the balance right between different elements of the market, as well as the different interest groups I mentioned a moment ago. And then the last point is not so much a contextual point, but simply that a destination management plan is the opportunity for you to participate in determining the future of your destination, of your island. It's all about working out together, getting the different stakeholders together. So we're talking about partnerships to work together on the plan, and then partnerships to implement the plan afterwards. And that's another topic that we will come back to later, exactly how that can work. And that there are different sorts of models that can apply. And we've looked at those in the context of Rhodes and Santorini. So, yes, essentially it's about you engaging, working together, and really addressing the issues of the future benefits to the destination in terms of economy, social life, environmental conservation. So the next slide is 9 still. So the definition of a destination management plan reflects what I've just been saying. It's a shared statement of intent to manage the destination over a stated period of time. In the case of Rhodes and Santorini, we were taking a 10-year perspective. And I think 10 years is quite good, certainly in terms of the overall strategy. Your action plan may be for a shorter period, but you really need to have the vision as to where you want your destination to be over the longer period. So you develop the statement of intent articulating the roles of the different stakeholders. And it's one of the key points about tourism that there's no one organisation who's managing it. It's not like a car factory where you've got one company that's managing the whole process. Tourism is a very complicated industry. In fact, it's not really one industry. It's a series of industries who are working together to address the demand of visitors. So getting people to work together is what it's all about, understanding the roles and responsibilities of different organisations, identifying clear actions that they will take, and the apportionment of resources, money, well, time and money. And it can be it has to be a combination of the two. We can't always get all the money we want, and sometimes you can substitute to some extent by additional effort or allocation of time. And then over on the right-hand side of the diagram, so it's about all aspects of the destination. So I've really covered this point already. Visitors, local residents, businesses, environment. It's all about addressing those in balance. And then the approach that we've taken in the DMPs is a very simple one. Where are we now? You know, understanding the starting point. If you don't understand where you are now, it's very difficult to work out where you want to be in the future. So start off with that. Where's the destination now? The situation analysis. Where does your destination want to be in tourism in, say, 10 years' time, in 2030? And that's all about the vision and the objectives that you want to achieve over that period of time. And then, how are we going to get there? How does the destination get there? And that's about the strategy and the action plan. And then finally, and this is beyond the project, measurement of performance. Over time, over a 10-year period, you need to continually measure how you're doing against the objectives and against achievement of the vision, and against the success of individual activities as well. So there's a monitoring element there, but what you don't want to do is to wait until 2030 and then try and evaluate. You need to get the measures going at the beginning, so that you've got this continual measurement of performance and the ability to manage your performance accordingly. And then, as well as that very simple thought process, 4 core principles: targeting those visitors who will provide the greatest benefit. And this is where we come back to the recent developments and thinking at the national level about how that should happen for Greece as a whole. So who will bring the greatest benefit to the destination in terms of those various things there: spending, length of stay, season of visit, propensity to travel beyond the honeypots, the crowded destinations, and most importantly, visitors who will really respect and appreciate the destination. And then, having identified the target markets, for your destination, then what does the destination have to do in terms of infrastructure, products, experiences, so that it appeals to those target markets. And then consider also the existing or potential negative impacts and how you can minimize or indeed eliminate those. And then finally, securing residents' understanding. As I said earlier, it's all about the people of the destination. That's what we're developing tourism for the benefit of the destination. So the people of the destination need to be part of the process. So it's all about them understanding tourism as a driver of the local economy, social cohesion, environmental conservation, so that they will be part of the whole effort of welcoming people to the destination and see it as tourism as a positive contribution to their lives. So this is the point where I hand over to Tom Bunkle. Tom.
Καλησπέρα σε όλους. Συγγνώμη, δεν μιλώ ελληνική, so I'm going to speak in English also. So can I just say before I start, it's a great, can you hear me at the back? Yes. It's a great pleasure to be back in Crete and in Chania. The first time I came to Crete, I came with my girlfriend, who is now my wife, and we were traveling around, and Crete, Greek hospitality is legendary, but for me, my experience of Cretan hospitality was very special. And we talk a lot about the word authenticity, authentic experiences in tourism. And the one I have here, I'm just going to relate very quickly. We were hiking through the countryside here and through some vineyards, and there were people picking grapes. And all of a sudden they went, "Ella, Ella, Ella!" And what? We thought there was some crisis. They called us over to the fields and immediately put a basket on my back. So I realized what they wanted me to do was go up and down the vines and let the ladies who were picking grapes put the grapes for you. Now, I'm sure it was. That to me was a very precious and memorable moment, and that's my memory of Crete. So thank you, Crete. Ευχαριστώ πολύ, Crete, for that. Anyway, back to the considerations in preparing a DMP. We have a lot of detail in these slides, so please, if there's anything you want to ask as we go along, please do so. But let's take you through the main issues you need to think about in preparing a destination management plan, a DMP. Basic ingredients. First, everybody's participation, the participation of major stakeholders, that the people who are important in the tourism industry buy into the way that what you're going to do. Secondly, it has to be evidence-based. We need to know where we stand. We need to do research. Mr. Research Pantazi here, as Roger said, has done so much data analysis and research for the projects we've done in Santorini and Rhodes, which we'll be looking at shortly. So it needs to be based on evidence. But that's also insights from experts, insights from market trends. But it has to be practical. We don't want a theoretical document. It has to have an action focus so you can use it. Governance is always an issue. How do we fund it? Who's going to do it? What's the body that's going to lead it? I would say as austerity increases around the world, these things used to be funded very much by public sector bodies. It gets harder and harder to identify the right people and the money. As well as having your and all the major stakeholders' commitment to doing this thing, to developing this DMP, we also need their commitment to implement it when it's being developed. And the other thing that's really important to remember, this is not a plan that sits on a shelf. This should be a live plan for the whole destination that people are updating, not every day, but as you go. It isn't a theoretical document. Changes as circumstances change. What do we want to get out of it? What are the major results? Well, I would suggest, as Roger said, a 10-year plan with a clear aim, vision, objectives, and an action plan. It really needs to underpin the economy, the socio-cultural environment, and the natural environment, so that it is sustainable for the long term. What you want to do, if you haven't already done, is get a distinctive brand for your destination, whether that's Hania or whether that's Crete, so that you can compete on the world stage, as Roger was saying. It's a big world and everybody wants those tourist dollars, pounds, euros. In order to do that, we need to, as Roger said, go for who are our best prospects, the people that will like what we've got the most, spend the most, and have least impact in terms of environmental, cultural, and damage to our heritage. So we need to prioritize our market segments, but not just geographically, by activity, behavior, and psychology. We'll come on to that later too. And then what you want out of it is to be able to know what improvements to make to the visitor products and experiences, or what new ones to develop. Do you need to develop kite surfing? Do you need to develop luxury boutique hotels? And then, as part of this, you need to be very clear what are the opportunities and what are the challenges that you're going to have to overcome. Also, you need to identify what are the infrastructure improvements. A lot of those will be for residents as well as for businesses. But what are the negative impacts of tourism? We hear a lot around the world and in parts of Greece about over-tourism and about too many people. Usually it's too many people in one place at one time. It's not all year round, but it's congestion at particular periods in particular places. So how do we address those? Are there too many people eroding the natural environment? Those sort of things. As I said, we need a body that is going to be responsible for overseeing the implementation of this DMP. It's not, everybody's going to have to play their part, but there needs to be a body that drives it forward, and that's a hard thing to put in place. And we need the commitment from all stakeholder communities, from the political community, from the business community, and the people, the residents themselves. When those three come together, then you're going to start cooking with gas. Anyway, so let's, the first step is to say, well, where are we now? We need to know where we are to know where we want to go. So where are we now? The key steps are, firstly, a briefing and inception meeting. Whether you're doing it yourselves or you're recruiting consultants to do it, you need to identify the context you're operating in. What is the purpose of developing a DMP? What outputs do you want to achieve? What are the main deliverables you want from this DMP? And what's the timetable? As Roger said, our timetable was by tomorrow. We actually felt that we would be asked to do it by yesterday. And then the inception meeting, really to identify what are the expectations that we have? What are the key issues that are going to come up that we're going to have to address, whether they're business, political, market trends, economic? What's the process we're going to go through? Who are the main stakeholders? Pantazis is going to talk about those shortly. What existing information, documents, strategies exist that we can cull information from to help inform us? And then we need to identify, right, what are the milestones? By the middle of June, we will have the first consultative report. By the 31st of October, we'll have it finished, things like that. And then, what resources do we have in terms of, do we have the right skills in the people to do this, and do we have the funding to manage it? Next, desk research. This is the easy bit in a way. There's a lot of stuff out there, we just need to find it. So, analysis and research of existing documents at local level, regional and national levels. The PESTEL, political, economic, social, technological, environmental and legal context. What are the trends that are affecting us? Are you still looking at that? What that will affect the outcome or the... that will affect the ability of us to do what we want to do with DMP. Who are our main competitors? What do we have that's better than them? Where do we sit? Who are our main stakeholders that we need to involve at which stage? What markets do we have? This is at the moment, not what do we want, but right now, who's coming here and what's the hierarchy of value from each market? And what do people think of us, visitor perceptions? What is the image of our destination. We need to try and understand that. And, then what's the state of the products and visitor experiences we have? Get an idea of the whole destination audit, really. Now, just to give you some examples of some of the things we did in Santorini and Rhodes. So this information was available on, and you have it here, the hotel capacity. This came from the Hellenic Chamber of Hotels. I'm not going to go into detail, but just to show you where we got, and where you can get some of this information. Many, many sources, but they're just examples. Then the scores for 3, 4, and 5-star hotels in Rhodes. How are they performing? Then, and that's from SETI, and then looking at the issue of short-term rentals, which is becoming in many places an issue. That was Air DNA that came from. Then looking at the markets, the easiest starting point is usually the airport. This was Fraport information for Rhodes. You can quickly see who are currently the biggest markets. Doesn't mean the potential is going to be the same, but that's the starting point. Then the attractions, the Hellenic Statistics Services was able to provide this, which looked at the most visited attractions. You see the Acropolis of Lindos, by far the most attractive, followed by the Palace of the Grand Master. In Santorini, Akrotiri was by far more or less the biggest attraction. So we get a sense of what people are doing, what the destination feels like to visitors, what we need to know. Cruise ship visits, this is for the whole of Greece. We actually have, it's Heraklion there, which is this one, isn't it? Yeah, is that right? Yeah, which is interesting. Most are in decline, except for Santorini, which went down and came up. And that was from the Hellenic Ports Association, and all desk research. Oops. And then we put together, from discussions and consultation with stakeholders around some of our own insights, on 2 axes, what are the main things, the physical assets that people really like and make about, this was for Santorini, make it stand out. And we said, well, the scenic beauty, the dramatic scenic beauty of Santorini is a big asset. And the other thing was locally produced food and wine, which is kind of a surprise to me. It's got a history, ancient history, of great gastronomy, but it also has, we found 70, I think, from TripAdvisor, many restaurants serving fine dining. So these presented...
10% of the supply of restaurants on the city, they refer to fine dining restaurants, which is, I mean, it happens only in the cases of Santorini and Mykonos.
So we said we're going to take the 2 biggest things for Santorini is this scenic beauty, which has a rather intimate feeling, and we produce food and wine. So who else does this well? Well, we said Canary Islands are a bit down here. Cyprus, Sicily is good on food, but not so good on the dramatic scenic beauty. Mykonos has a similar level of scenic beauty, not so good on food. So where you want to be is really up here, high on scenic beauty and high on food. So guess where Santorini sits? So that's where we said, this is where competitively we assessed it would stand out. Then we said, well, emotionally, how do visitors feel about Santorini? What are the strongest things they feel? And there was this sense that it's a very romantic destination. I don't want to go into too much detail, but I'm sure you get a sense of what I mean. Then it's also a very indulgent place where you can really indulge your senses of taste and sight and just a feeling. Very, very indulgent. It's not utilitarian or pragmatic. So Mykonos has that sort of romantic feel. A lot of other Cyclades do as well. But again, this is where Santorini came. So those are the 2 ways we started to identify how competitive Santorini was, where its competitive edge sat. And then we went on to map who are our main stakeholders, which Fantastic is going to talk to you about.
Well, very briefly, Για μας το βασικό στοιχείο ήταν ακριβώς επειδή δώσαμε πολύ μεγάλη έμφαση στον ρόλο που παίζουν οι τοπικές κοινωνίες, από την πρώτη στιγμή να λάβουμε υπόψη τις βασικές θέσεις των κυρίως φορέων στις περιοχές των δύο προορισμών της Ζώρου και της Σαντορίνης, που προφανώς μιλάμε τόσο για την περιφέρεια Νοτιού Αιγαίου όσο και για τους Δήμους και τα επιμελητήρια που είχαν έναν κομβικό ρόλο σε κάθε φάση της υλοποίησης του έργου. Αλλά αντίστοιχα φυσικά έπρεπε να λάβουμε υπόψη μας και όλες τις θέσεις και τοποθετήσεις των βασικών φορέων του τουριστικού τομέα, όπως εκφράζονται συλλογικά μέσα από διαφορετικά όργανα και καλύπτουν διαφορετικούς κλάδους του τουριστικού τομέα, καταλύματα, τουριστικά γραφεία και λοιπούς κλάδους. Και ταυτόχρονα, επειδή ακριβώς μας ενδιαφέρει πάρα πολύ ο παράγοντας της τοπικής κοινωνίας, community groups, κινήσεις πολιτών οι οποίες με τον έναν ή με τον άλλον τρόπο αναμεικνύονται στα δρόμενα της τουριστικής ανάπτυξης και έχουν έναν πολύ σημαντικό ρόλο να διαδραματίσουν, ακριβώς επειδή αυτό που λέγαμε πάντα η ελληνική φιλοξενία δεν είναι αποτέλεσμα μόνο, δεν μπορούμε να τη θεωρούμε ως κάτι δεδομένο. Για να υφίσταται, πρέπει οι τοπικές κοινωνίες να αγκαλιάζουν την τουριστική δραστηριότητα σε κάθε της πτυχή. Και φυσικά από εκεί και πέρα υπήρχε η πολύ σημαντική πρόκληση να συγκεράσουμε όλες αυτές τις διαφορετικές φωνές και να δημιουργήσουμε ένα πλαίσιο μέσα στο οποίο θα μπορούσαν όλοι να αρχίσουν να αντιλαμβάνονται τις διαφορετικές θέσεις, γιατί προφανώς είναι δεδομένο ότι δεν υπάρχει σε κάθε προορισμό απόλυτη σύμπνοια σε όλα τα ζητήματα. Αυτό το συγκεκριμένο slide είναι πιο πολύ ακριβώς για το γεγονός ότι στην πορεία, σε όλη τη διαδικασία της διαβούλευσης που έλαβε χώρα στους δύο προορισμούς, λάβαμε υπόψη και φορείς εθνικούς, οι οποίοι είχαν την ευγενή καλοσύνη να μας παρέχουν σχόλια και τοποθετήσεις σε διαφορετικά στάδια και πάντα υπό την αιγίδα της CBRD όλες οι επικοινωνίες. Μια βασική πρόκληση που είχαμε να αντιμετωπίσουμε ήταν ακριβώς το γεγονός ότι έπρεπε να οργανώσουμε διαβουλεύσεις σε τοπικό επίπεδο και αυτό ήταν μια αρκετά δύσκολη δραστηριότητα, γιατί έλαβε χώρα στο μέσο της τουριστικής περίοδου και είναι δεδομένο ότι σε πολλούς προορισμούς της χώρας όταν πηγαίνεις και λες ότι θα κάνουμε άλλη μια έρευνα, έχουν γίνει αρκετές έρευνες και υπάρχει και μια σχετική δυσπιστία για κάθε νέα πρωτοβουλία.
A lot of exercise tonight. So, as Roger was saying, we need to focus on who are the best markets for us. And the way we figure that out is to say, well, who's going to provide us the most value, both currently and in the future? Well, that's easy to say, but really the calculation is the volume that people are spending times the amount of money they're spending times their repeat visit propensity. So, for instance, many European visitors have a chance of coming several times in a lifetime. Many long-haul visitors may come only once. So that needs to be factored in when you decide who your key target markets are and how relatively valuable they are. And the other issue is about sustainability. So we can multiply that by sustainability. What impact will visitors have on the island's natural environment, its physical infrastructure, its natural resources, and the community? So the more they're likely to do these things, the better. The more they're likely to spread around rather than just stay in one place. The more they're likely to visit outside the main season. The fewer scarce resources they're likely to consume or damage, the better. And the less congestion they're likely to cause, and the more their activity, their behaviour, the things they like to do will contribute towards heritage preservation and natural environment conservation. So that's how we try to define sustainable visitors. It's not easy, it's really hard to do that with data, but it's about both qualitative and quantitative analysis. And that then allowed us to say, well, we can decide then who are our best prospects to target. Then what do they think about the destination, we try to identify the current visitor perceptions. And you can do this by existing visitor surveys, social media monitoring, doing sentiment analysis on the web, getting an idea of how many times is your destination mentioned positively, negatively, so on. Reviews and ratings from websites like TripAdvisor and online travel agents, and importantly, which we did, the consultation with stakeholders in the destination, all help to build a picture. And now, just to take you back to the TripAdvisor bit, here's fantastic.
Thank you for this pass, Tom, and it also gives me a great opportunity to say that despite the kind references of Roger and Tom earlier on, the production of research insights could never be a one-man's job. And at Kosovo we have been working with Greek destinations for the last 10 years, and we are very well aware of limitations that exist with regard to available data. For example, in the case of Santorini, we were, allow me to rephrase, we were not happy to identify that, for example, in the case of hotel arrivals and hotel overnight statistics provided by the Hellenic Statistics Service, the sample, the available sample was 48% of hotels. So the first thing we discussed within our team is that this information is pretty much useless in the case of this destination management plan, because it is not comparable, first of all, with data from Fraport. It is not comparable with data from provided again by the Hellenic Statistics Service with regard to ferry traffic, because, for example, in the case of Santorini, there was a very big challenge about identifying the volume of day visitors. That's only one example on how seriously we take the production of research insights, and that's why we were very happy to come up with this analysis with regard to visitor attractions. It is from Rose in particular. We implemented a methodology of data scrapping in order to identify first of all data on ratings, reviews, and shares of top reviews, 5 and 4 star, for key visitor experiences and attractions in Rhodes. And it was a great opportunity for us, first of all, to identify that despite the fact that they don't have very big volumes, the cultural sites of Rhodes have received very positive reviews and ratings by the visitors. Although that from the site visits that we have conducted, we have identified that there are still areas of improvement. But at the same time, we have identified that a couple of key natural attractions in the case of the island, they perform not so well. So these kind of insights gave us the opportunity to suggest different types of guidelines among our strategic priorities for heritage interpretation and heritage improvement in general.
Just to keep you awake. When you're doing the destination audit, where you're looking at what your destination has, these are the main things to look at. I'm going to go through them quickly because I'm sure you know what they're. We're looking at the tourism facilities, accommodation, restaurants, bars, attractions, retail, shops, the heritage and culture, from folk traditions to folk historic sites, living culture, cuisine, the landscape, the countryside, the quality, appeal and distinctiveness of it, the built environment, the towns, the villages, the public realm, the monuments, the parks, the gardens, commercial signage, access and transport, airport, roads, sea, ferries, cruise services, internal transport, an audit of that. Visitor services, this is about information provision, signage, both directional signage, how to get from the port to wherever, and also interpretive, which actually around the world is not as good as it could be, interpreting local sites and customs. Parking, toilets, shade. It was amazing me in many warm countries how little shade there is for people waiting for ferries, waiting for cruise ships. And accessibility for people who have a disability, how disabled friendly or how accessible is your destination. Activities and events of all kinds, festivals, cultural and sporting events, business events, community events. And when you look at these things for your destination, in doing this audit, there are 5 criteria that you should use as a lens. The first is really the quantity, the inventory. How many of these have you got? Secondly, the quality. How good are they? And again, a lot of this is going to be subjective, but informed by a wide range of opinion. Distinctiveness. How much do they reflect Hania? Or could they be anywhere in Greece? Or could they be anywhere in the world? It's really important to make sure that what you have is reflecting your own sense of place. Then consider how future-proof are they? In terms of the market trends, as far as we can tell, are they suitable? Are they going to be good for the future, or are they old-fashioned, are they out of date? And competitiveness. Compared to other destinations, how competitive are they? What barriers are there to the development that you might need to put in place to make them competitive? What support might you need? So those are the 5 filters that you should be looking at your destination's visitor products and visitor experiences through. And now I'm going to hand back. This really is fantastic.
Αναφερόμαστε λοιπόν προηγουμένως στο γεγονός ότι υπάρχει ανάγκη για να μπορέσουμε να ενώσουμε τις φωνές πολλών διαφορετικών φορέων και μελών των τοπικών κοινωνιών. Αλλά για να συμβεί αυτό πρέπει πρώτα απ' όλα να υπάρχει μια πολύ συστηματική επικοινωνία μιας τέτοιας πρωτοβουλίας. Για να επιτευχθεί κάτι τέτοιο υπάρχουν πάρα πολλά εργαλεία και ορισμένα από αυτά που χρησιμοποιήθηκαν και στην περίπτωση του συγκεκριμένου του πιλωτικού προγράμματος διαχείρισης προορισμών ήταν πρώτα απ' όλα η δημιουργία μιας εξειδικευμένης ιστοσελίδας, η οποία τέθηκε σε λειτουργία αμέσως μετά την υλοποίηση των policy workshops και γενικά της διαβούλευσης. Θα αναφερθούμε εκτενέστερα στη συνέχεια για το τι έγινε εκεί. Τέλη Ιουνίου δημιουργήθηκε η εκτεταμένη ιστοσελίδα και από τότε επικαιροποιείται συχνά, τακτικά, και σίγουρα θα είναι και ένα βασικό κανάλι στο οποίο για την περαιτέρω επικοινωνία των σχεδίων, όταν αυτά ολοκληρωθούν και τυπικά και γίνει και η επίσημη μετάφρασή τους στα ελληνικά από τα αγγλικά. Ταυτόχρονα όμως υπήρξαν αποστολές ή υπήρξε υλοποίηση email campaign, ώστε ακριβώς όταν ξεκίνησε η υλοποίηση των online ερευνών να μπορέσουν οι τοπικοί φορείς να ενημερωθούν κατάλληλα και με τη σειρά τους να βοηθήσουν στο να δραστηριοποιηθούν τα μέλη τους και για να απαντήσουν τα ερωτηματολόγια. Οπωσδήποτε οι δημόσιες συναντήσεις και όλες εκείνες οι ενέργειες διαβούλευσης που έλαβαν ήταν ένας πολύ σημαντικός τρόπος για να επικοινωνηθεί το έργο. Και φυσικά αναπτύσσεις στα social media, οι οποίες λάβανε χώρα μέσα από διαφορετικούς φορείς. Στην περίπτωση της Ρόδου, από την πρώτη στιγμή είχαμε φερειπίν μια εξαιρετική υποστήριξη από τον εμπορικό σύλλογο του νησιού, ο οποίος σε κάθε φορά που υπήρχε μια επικαιροποίηση στην ιστοσελίδα, φρόντιζε με τη σειρά του να την επικοινωνεί και να ενημερώνει τα μέλη του, αλλά και οποιοδήποτε άλλο είναι ακόλουθος του στα social media. Και φυσικά τα τοπικά μέσα μαζικής ενημέρωσης παίζουν και αυτό το ρόλο τους. Όταν πια υλοποιούσαμε τις online έρευνες για επιχειρήσεις και τοπικές κοινωνίες, και φυσικά μέχρι τότε είχαν γίνει τα κλασικά δελτία τύπου, θεωρήσαμε ότι ήταν απαραίτητο να γίνει και μια μίνι καμπάνια σε τοπικά μέσα, ώστε ακριβώς να μπορέσει περισσότερος κόσμος να μάθει για το έργο και για τις δυνατότητες να έχει ενεργό συμμετοχή σε αυτό. Και εδώ έχουμε λίγες παραπάνω πληροφορίες για την εξειδικευμένη ιστοσελίδα, η οποία είναι φυσικά σε λειτουργία και μπορείτε να τη σκεφτείτε. Είναι www, είναι λίγο σιδηρόδρομος το όνομα, αλλά ακριβώς θέλαμε να είμαστε απόλυτα συμβατοί με τις απαιτήσεις της CBRD. www.destinationmanagementplan.gr, υπάρχει και στα ελληνικά και στα αγγλικά. Και έχει διάφορες ενότητες, οι οποίες αφορούν τόσο τις φάσεις του έργου αναλυτικά, τα παραδοτέα που ετοιμάζουμε και τα οποία θα είναι σε μεταγενέστερο χρόνο διαθέσιμο μέσα από αυτή τη σελίδα. Ήταν το βασικό κανάλι για όσους θέλουν να συμμετέχουν στις έρευνες κατά την περίοδο υλοποίησής τους. Υπήρχαν buttons τα οποία σε οδηγούσαν στην πλατφόρμα του SurveyMonkey, όπου υπήρχαν τα ερωτηματολόγια. Και από εκεί πέρα φυσικά υπήρχαν και τα στοιχεία επικοινωνίας, ώστε ανά πάσα στιγμή κάποιος, αν ήθελε περισσότερες εξειδικευμένες πληροφορίες ή να καταθέσει κάποιο άλλο ερώτημα, μπορούσε να επικοινωνήσει μαζί μας. Tom, I hope this is the last time I come to you.
Yeah, hi, it's me again. So the stakeholder consultation was a really important part of the process. We've done the research, done the desk research, and in stakeholder consultation, the important thing was to interview individual primary stakeholders, visit different sites, hold workshops with those stakeholders. The purpose of these initial, because there are later stakeholder meetings, or the stakeholder workshops, the purpose of the initial workshops was fact-finding, to get information from stakeholders, but also what was really important was to engage them in the project and get their buy-in to the idea of developing a destination management plan, get their understanding of what it was. Community forum to seek views of communities and their concerns, and also to get their buy-in to the idea so they feel something is moving. The next stage was to go, and this is where you start to get probably to a little bit more cost, but not necessarily that much, but a consumer survey of people who'd already visited the destination. And that would range, the questions we asked would range from what does the visitor look like, the visitor profile, what do they think of the place, what are their attitudes, what do they like, what don't they like, what improvements would they like to see, how do they plan, what are the booking sources, and what was their experience in the destination. And then a survey of what I call non-visitors, but it's quite useful to know why people who might be in your target market have not visited, but it's hard to actually identify those people. But the sort of questions you might want to ask them was, well, what do they like when they travel? What experiences are they looking for? How do they perceive your destination? Because really that is going to tell you a little bit about why they haven't already visited. Excuse me. And then what other destinations have they visited and considered why? Which will give you some insight into who they think your competitors are. And then again, what sources do they use for planning? Then we also did an industry survey locally, of local inbound tour operators, and that's really about the questions you should be asking, I think, are how is business performing, what do you see, what do stakeholders see as the areas of growth, the main opportunities, what are the constraints on growth, who are the main target markets, who are the main competitors, what do they see as the main challenges, what do they see as positive in terms of what tourism does for the place, what do they see as the potential negative impacts, and what changes would they like to see. And I would always suggest asking them, in 5 years' time, what differences would you like to see? And then the community survey. A survey of residents to find out how satisfied they are with tourism development. Interestingly, there was quite a high level of dissatisfaction in one or two. I think in Central England, about 55% of community residents, 80%. What is their attitude to visitors? What are the positive and negative impacts? Because if they're telling you it's all negative, they can't get to the shops, they can't drive on the roads because of buses and cruise passengers, you're going to have a real problem when you start developing your DMP, and you have to think how you're going to deal with that. And what is so other questions, what is the impact of tourism on their daily life? Overall, is tourism a good thing or a bad thing? Interestingly, a lot of people did still see the benefits, but they didn't like some of the negatives. And what changes would they like to see? Another example from a place where I worked on destination management plans in Iceland. And I remember a farmer saying, I cannot drive my combine harvester to cut my crops to my fields because the roads are narrow. They're full of tourists and they're blocking the roads. So little things like that, which you wouldn't expect when you're dealing at a high level with international destination marketing, we need to be thinking about at a community level. And the only way really is to do this kind of survey. So we get to the stage where we're coming now to the end of the first stage of where are we now. And we need to pull together a summary of the situation analysis. Really collecting the key points that have emerged from this research and consultation all around the performance of the destination, what condition is the destination in, destination audit, what do people think of visitors, what are the positive and negative impacts, what are people's concerns and aspirations, and what are the opportunities and challenges. And a SWOT, you know what a SWOT is, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threat analysis. In two parts, I would suggest you have a destination SWOT which looks at the competitiveness of the destination, but also an institutional SWOT in terms of, if you're going to do this DMP, do you have the human resource? Do you have the capacity? What are the political, institutional and legal issues that might hinder you doing it? So the two elements to the SWOT. And now we get on to the next, which is really the action bit. Where do you want to be in 2030 and how can you get there? Are you doing this? So I'm off there.
So the planning development has various key elements within it. I've actually covered a lot of this in one of my early slides when I was looking at the timetables. Sorry about that. So I've covered a lot of this already in that first timetable slide, so I'm going to move quickly through this. These are the different elements. Well, I guess there's one particular point here, and that is that we identified strategic priorities. My view is that for a plan to be understandable, it's got to have a limited number of top priorities so that people understand what the plan is all about. If you have 190 recommendations which are just listed, then you really can't get a full understanding. If you break it down against the strategic priorities for the destination, the whole thing becomes much more coherent. So that was an important part of the process, developing the strategic priorities and then translating that into an action plan. And also another point to bring out, having done the strategic priorities, then we needed to move on to the governance and implementation. In other words, how can all of this be made to happen? And Pantasis is going to talk about that in a minute. The monitoring progress, I talked earlier about the main interest groups, community, industry, visitors, environment. One of the ways of monitoring progress is to survey each of those, survey community on a regular basis, tourism businesses and visitors, to understand about their level of satisfaction with progress, any views on how things can be improved. And then with regard to environment, we need to have some sort of environmental impact analysis study that can be undertaken on a regular basis. And so that's at the more overall level, and then more specifically within the DMP, a number of specific actions, and you need to monitor progress against those individual actions. So the DMP framework, we've got two things here, the strategic aim and the vision. So this is where do we want to be. These are the strategic aim and the vision for roads. I'm not going to go through the detail of that. You can, of course, have a look later. I'm very happy to discuss them, but really just indicating this is what we did for roads, and similarly for Santorini. So start with the strategic aim as to what you want to achieve for the destination, and then set out the picture of tourism as you would want to see it in 10 years' time. And that's what we've tried to do, to encapsulate in a relatively simple statement. And then the high-level objectives. Essentially, to be meaningful, objectives should be quantified. And so what we sought to do, and just to give you all of the objectives, in each case there's a quantifiable element within that, except perhaps number 5, which is about establishing the all-year-round programme of events, but some measure could be introduced relating to that. Some of the detail of this we'll come back to. The strategic priorities that I mentioned, these are the ones that we identified for roads. I think there's one more on the next slide. So roads for all seasons, essentially moving roads from being a very seasonal destination to one which is an all year round destination. Related to that, repositioning within the marketplace, because at the moment it's very focused on sun, sea, sand. It has lots of resources to bring people at other times of the year. So how do we take advantage of those resources in terms of the appropriate markets? It's a really big issue, and obviously one that's highly relevant at the national level as well as the local level, seasonality, and how you move out of a certain sort of mindset that exists at the moment, that there's a 7-month season and then everything closes down. Breaking through that mindset is a major challenge, but road certainly has the potential to do it. And then sustainability, looking at all the different elements of sustainability. That's an even bigger element of the strategic priorities in the case of Santorini. The major pressure point in roads is the city and the old town in particular. So managing visitors in the city is important. I talked about, as well as overall destination management, visitor management, and ensuring that you can handle people in the best possible way in terms of their satisfaction and impact on the residents. Extending the footprint, moving at the moment, the majority of tourism and roads very focused on the northern part of the island. There are resources in the central part of the island and in the south which can also be utilised. Again, there's a question of what markets will those appeal to and how can we target those markets. And then simply enhancing the visitor experience. Ultimately, the benefits we're seeking are to the islands, but as an instrument, as a measure towards that, you have to satisfy the visitor. You need to understand what the current satisfactions are, what the dissatisfactions are, and take action accordingly. So that's all about quality. Marketing plan, targets, segments. This brings us back to Tom.
Yeah, just to give you a quick idea of one bunch of segments that we identified to target, to address the priority one, develop and build, very off-season focus. We said in years 1 to 2 we should focus on developing and getting airlines to fly in, and that a lot of the effort would go on persuading them. And then only in years 2 to 5 could we really do much off-season marketing once that product was in place. Primary, we divided into primary and secondary segments. The primary segments that we felt would be most valuable, using that formula I showed you before, with value times sustainability, would be culturally, we defined them as culturally curious visitors from UK and Germany. Outdoor enthusiasts, could be hiking, could be cycling, could be, well, it wouldn't be water sports, probably the off-season, but hiking, cycling from the UK and Germany. And then off-season short break, because people are just having a general short break, wanting to get away to somewhere that's a little bit not so cold as where they come from. Secondary segments, he said, would be off-season short breakers from Sweden, Poland, Israel and Russia. Special interest devotees from UK and Germany. These would be people who might come on a yoga retreat, to do painting class, cooking class, a whole range of active escapes or learning escapes. And the majority of those people will be found here in the UK and Germany. And MICE, meetings, incentives, conventions and exhibitions, focusing primarily on conference visitors, but also incentive visitors from UK and Germany, followed by Sweden. And the brand image, I talked about the competitiveness and needing to differentiate yourself from everyone else at the beginning. We came up with the positioning should be, people know roads, it's pretty familiar, but only in the main season. So it's pretty familiar, but it's undiscovered. So this is a positioning, you don't know the half of it, really. I'm not going into advertising slogans, but it's familiar yet undiscovered, which there's a promise in there addressing the problem. And the brand proposition was saying it's a historic beach. We would never say that in advertising copy or what, but basically that's the conceptual idea. Yes, it's a beach destination, but there's much beyond the beach. You've got layers and layers of history from ancient, Hellenic, Roman, Ottoman, medieval, Italian, contemporary. But beyond the beach, it is also surprisingly green for an Aegean island. And refreshingly active, the opportunities for activities, hiking, cycling. So that's the kind of brand positioning that we are suggesting the island should have to help attract business outside the main season. And we came up with 5 themes, brand narrative themes. Brand narrative is really just the stories that Rhodes should tell it about itself. And there's lots of stuff behind this, but undiscovered gems. There's lots of stuff beyond the beach to discover that people haven't. Massive variety of landscape. A lot of people just see the coast, but you've got hills, you've got forests, you've got farms, lots of variety. A lot of cultural diversity, as I've just said, from different eras. Colossal characters. Colossus was from Rhodes. That word has gone into the English language and the Italian language, many other languages. You have the Colosseum in Rome. Do we know it comes from Rhodes? Let's help Rhodes claim it. And who are the other colossal? The people like Cicero and Julius Caesar who studied there. So lots of characters that we can tell stories about. It's all about stories. And it's an island of active escape. You can hike and cycle there. And it's sun and sea plus. This is the beyond the beach bit. So those are the areas where there's lots of information. Well, there's mythology, there's folklore, there's stories behind all these, but these are the high-level themes that we're proposing. I'm going to hand back to Roger now. I think I'm done.
So we've talked already about the importance of developing exceptional experiences, ones that differentiate the destination. And this is it's not a brand pyramid, it's a visitor experience pyramid. Because it's not coming through the marketing side, it's coming from the overall brand promise and then looking at the experiences that can be developed in order to fulfill the promise. So in a sense it's a cascading a cascading process here coming from the brand promise through the unique selling proposition for the destination to the themes and stories. Tom has just touched on that. Lots of different elements within the context of Rhodes. And then really the heart of it is the signature experiences, the predominant experiences. In the case of Rhodes, we put those together in a series of routes, 7 routes. And those routes together, those routes can bring together different elements from the themes and stories. And then supporting the signature routes, we've got events in particular, which are incredibly important, particularly in terms of off-season development, and then various related products and services that are necessary to support that. We could spend a long time talking about this, but the main thing really is just to get the overall concept of understanding what the brand promise is and how that translates down into experiences, well, themes, experiences, and then the products that support those. We're going to within the context of the work, as I mentioned earlier, we looked at illustrations from elsewhere. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of that. One of the examples we looked at was Dubrovnik. In fact, we looked at Dubrovnik in 2 respects. One was the way in which it's addressing the issue of cruise management, which is a very big issue in Santorini as well. Also, Dubrovnik has been very active in terms of off-season development. To the extent that it's enabled Dubrovnik to develop 7 new airline routes in the off-season. But I'm not showing you that one, but just showing this one, what they're doing in terms of managing visitor numbers in line with carrying capacity. So they've developed the concept of carrying capacity for the city, and then they've translated that in terms of what that means in terms of numbers of cruise ships and the number of passengers that can come ashore every day. And they've introduced a levy for the cruise passengers. And that is obviously something that then contributes to the management of the destination. Another example we've got here is Istria, definitely a destination to watch in terms of innovative activity and extending the season. Some considerable time ago, I can't remember now the year, but certainly more than 10 years ago, they developed the concept of a wine road, and it went from one road to many roads. And that in turn developed other things, so a festival developed around that, and as a result of the development of that program, 7 new wineries started, and 117 winemakers. And then the idea spread to olives. The olive growers thought, well, if it's working for wine and the vineyards, well, why don't we do it? So the olive growers got together and they've created a number of olive routes as well. And of course this can develop into lots of other things in terms of development of particular brands and a whole range of merchandise that can relate to these developments. And now we're going to talk briefly about the different models that we identified, particularly Pantazis and his colleague Manolis, that they developed for the way in which implementation might take place in each of the destinations.
Είμαστε λοιπόν στο πιο κρίσιμο ζήτημα, που είναι φυσικά όλα αυτά που έχουμε συζητήσει μέχρι τώρα, σαν έναν οποιονδήποτε ελληνικό προορισμό, πώς μπορεί να γίνει η διακυβέρνησή τους και πώς μπορεί πραγματικά να προχωρήσει η υλοποίηση ενός σχεδίου διαχείρισης προορισμού. Ένα πολύ σημαντικό στοιχείο εδώ πέρα πρέπει να τονίσουμε είναι ότι η υλοποίηση του έργου συνέπεσε όχι μόνο με το μέσο της τουριστικής σεζόν, αλλά και με το γεγονός ότι υπήρχαν εκλογές τόσο σε επίπεδο τοπικής αυτοδιοίκησης, όσο αργότερα προέκυψαν και σε εθνικό επίπεδο. Και στην περίπτωση της τοπικής αυτοδιοίκησης αυτό παράλληλα σήμαινε ότι οι καινούργιες δημοτικές αρχές που προέκυψαν στους υποεξέταση δήμους ανέλαβαν τα καθήκοντά τους την 1η Σεπτεμβρίου. Αυτό που μόνο ήταν μια σημαντική πρόκληση. Σε κάθε περίπτωση όμως, ο σκοπός ο δικός μας δεν ήταν να έρθουμε σε αυτούς τους προορισμούς με ένα τελικό πακέτο λύσης, αλλά να προτείνουμε διαφορετικού είδους σενάρια και προτάσεις, οι οποίες πρέπει να εκφρίζουν διερεύνησης και συζήτησης και σε τοπικό αλλά και σε εθνικό ακόμα επίπεδο, γιατί για να μπορέσουμε να δημιουργήσουμε ένα πλαίσιο διακυβέρνησης προορισμών απαιτούνται σε πολλές περιπτώσεις και τροποποιήσεις της νομοθεσίας. Το πρώτο σενάριο λοιπόν κάνει λόγο για την δημιουργία ενός νέου οργανισμού. Ενός νέου οργανισμού που θα μπορούσε να φέρει, εφόσον υπήρχαν αλλαγές στην νομοθεσία, να υπάγεται τόσο στο υφιστάμενο πλαίσιο της συμπράξης δημόσιου και ιδιωτικού τομέα, ή ακόμα θα μπορούσε να ήταν και να υπάγεται και στην νομοθεσία και τις αναπτυξιακές εταιρείες των Δήμων, εφόσον όμως και εκεί υπήρχε άρση κάποιων περιορισμών που υφίστανται από τον νόμο του Καλλικράτη. Σε γενικές γραμμές αυτό είναι το πιο στιβαρό σενάριο, διότι πραγματικά η δημιουργία ενός νέου οργανισμού, ο οποίος υποστηρίζεται από φορείς οι οποίοι είναι αποφασισμένοι να συμβάλλουν σε βάθος χρόνου σε μια τέτοια ενέργεια, είναι εκείνο το σενάριο που έχει την καλύτερη δυνατή προοπτική. Εν τούτοις όμως, επειδή ακριβώς απαιτεί πολύ σημαντικές εργασίες και σε νομοθετικό επίπεδο αλλά και σε επίπεδο διασφάλισης πόρων, θεωρήσαμε ότι είναι ένα σενάριο το οποίο ίσως έχει έναν ιδεατό κατά κάποιο τρόπο χαρακτήρα και οφείλουν να υπάρξουν και επιπρόσθετα σενάρια εξέτασης. Αναλύσαμε και σε κάθε περίπτωση δεν θα πω σε λεπτομέρειες εδώ, λόγω πίεσης χρόνου, αλλά κάθε σενάριο που έχουμε αναλύσει και τα οποία φυσικά θα υπάρχουν αναλυτικά και στα δύο σενάρια και στα δύο σχέδια διαχείρισης προορισμών, αλλά και στον οδικό προετοιμασίας, το Guide Destination Management Planning, αναλύουμε διεξοδικά τα βασικά πλεονεκτήματα και μειονεκτήματα που υπάρχουν για κάθε σενάριο από αυτά. Το δεύτερο σενάριο αφορούσε την αξιοποίηση υφιστάμενων οργανισμών και υπάρχουν διαφορετικές περιπτώσεις αναπροορισμού. Εντελώς ενδεικτικά, τόσο στην περίπτωση του Δήμου Ρόδου, όσο και στην περίπτωση του Δήμου Σαντορίνης, υπάρχουν μονομετοχικές εταιρείες, οι οποίες έχουν διαφορετικού τύπου δραστηριότητα, αλλά οι οποίες ένα βασικό μειονέκτημα που αντιμετωπίζουν είναι ότι δεν μπορούν να συνάψουν προγραμματικές συμβάσεις. Και αυτό φυσικά έχει ξεκάθαρες επιπτώσεις για την δυνατότητα χρηματοδότησής τους. Στην περίπτωση πάλι του επιμελητηρίου του δεκανήσου υπάρχει η αναπτυξιακή τους εταιρεία, η οποία είναι αρκετά δραστήρια, η οποία έχει πολύ μεγάλη απήχηση και σε τοπικό και σε περιφερειακό επίπεδο, και η οποία εφόσον υπήρχε μια προσπάθεια για αλλαγή στο καταστατικό της και φυσικά παράλληλα με ένα πλαίσιο, με ένα προγραμματικό πλαίσιο για συνεργασία με φορείς όπως ο Δήμος και η Περιφέρεια, θα μπορούσε να αποτελέσει μια λύση. Και ακριβώς ένα παρόμοιο σενάριο το διαγράψαμε και στην περίπτωση της αναπτυξιακής εταιρείας της Περιφέρειας Νοτιού Αιγαίου. Και πάλι όμως, και σε αυτή την περίπτωση μιλάμε για πρωτοβουλίες και δράσεις οι οποίες έχουν κυρίως υπό την ομπρέλα του δημόσιου τομέα και ξέρουμε φυσικά και νομίζω όλοι έχουμε γνώση των προκλήσεων που συνεπάγεται μια τέτοια προσπάθεια. Το τρίτο σενάριο έρχεται ως αποτέλεσμα της πρόσφατης εμπειρίας που έχει καταγραφεί στην περίπτωση της Αθήνας με τη δημιουργία του This is Athens and Partners, της απόφασης 4 βασικών φορέων του Δήμου της Αθήνας καταρχάς, με την Εταιρεία Ανάπτυξης και Τουριστικής Προβολής Αθηνών, αλλά και της Aegean Airlines, του Διεθνούς Αερολιμένα Αθηνών και του ΣΕΤΕ με τη Marketing Greece, να έχουν ένα μνημόνιο συνεργασίας, το οποίο βασίζεται πρώτα απ' όλα στην εμπιστοσύνη των μελών και το γεγονός ότι δημιουργούμε ένα σχέδιο δράσης, έχουμε ετήσιες θεματικές εισφορές σε ένα κοινό κουμπαρά, αλλά από εκεί πέρα ο κάθε οργανισμός, στο πλαίσιο αυτής της κοινής ατζέντας, αναλαμβάνει να υλοποιήσει τις δικές του δράσεις και να συμβάλλει σε ένα κοινό στόχο. Τα καλά νέα σε αυτό το σενάριο είναι ότι για να μπορεί να λειτουργήσει σε διαφορετικούς τύπους προορισμών απαιτείται ένα υψηλό επίπεδο εμπιστοσύνης μεταξύ των φορέων που αποφασίζουν να μπουν σε αυτή τη διαδικασία και να υπογράψουν ακριβώς ένα μνημόνιο συνεργασίας. Η λέξη μνημόνιο στην ελληνική πραγματικότητα πάντα έχει διαφορετικά connotations, αλλά δεν πρέπει να είναι ένας τρόπος συνεργασίας με πολύ συγκεκριμένο χρονικό ορίζοντα και δεσμεύσεις. Τα κακά νέα είναι και πάλι το γεγονός ότι απαιτείται η εμπιστοσύνη αυτή να διατηρείται σε βάθος χρόνου. Αυτό πολλές φορές εξαρτάται από χρονικές συγκυρίες, εξαρτάται από συγκεκριμένα πρόσωπα που αναλαμβάνουν θέσεις και ισχύ σε συγκεκριμένους οργανισμούς και είναι κάτι που φυσικά δεν μπορεί να θεωρείται δεδομένο σε καμία περίπτωση, αλλά είναι κάτι που πρέπει να καλλιεργείται για να μπορεί να διατηρηθεί σε βάθος χρόνου. Στην περίπτωση του This is Athens and Partners, αυτό που εμείς λαμβάνουμε ως ένα πολύ μεγάλο στοιχείο είναι το γεγονός ότι από τη στιγμή που δημιουργείται ένα τόσο ισχυρό brand, είναι πολύ ευέλικτο στο να προσελκύσει υψηλής ποιότητας εργατικό δυναμικό, κάτι που είναι απολύτως απαραίτητο όταν καλείσαι να υλοποιήσει ένα τόσο απαιτητικό πλάνο. Και από εκεί πέρα φυσικά υπάρχει αυτή η ισορροπία μεταξύ της παρουσίας του δημόσιου και του ιδιωτικού τομέα, ώστε να μπορούν πραγματικά όλες οι διαφορετικές προσδοκίες και σχέδια να συγκεραστούν υπό την ομπρέλα ενός κοινού σχεδίου. Στην περίπτωση και των δύο προορισμών καταλήξαμε με ένα μείγμα διαφορετικών προτάσεων, τα οποία φυσικά έχουν τεθεί υπό την γνώση των βασικών φορέων και από εδώ και πέρα περιμένουμε περαιτέρω σχολή και παρατηρήσεις, ώστε όταν πια θα ολοκληρωθούν και τα ελληνικά σχέδια, να προσαρμόσουμε την τελική μας πρόταση.
So we're 2 slides from the break now. So it's a good point to finish off by talking about challenges in preparing, actually we're not 2 slides, we're a little bit more. Challenges in preparing the DMP. In our case, we had 6 months, and that is, I would say, the absolute minimum. Stakeholder participation and buy-in, absolutely fundamental, we've touched on that. And related to that, I have to say, the timing of this whole exercise was not of our choice. To do this over the summer period really was not ideal at all, and we wouldn't recommend that to anyone else. But nevertheless, it was constrained in terms of the funding from the EU, and we had to do it over the period. So availability of stakeholders then was another issue. So we might have stakeholders who were willing in principle, but in practice found it difficult to participate. We also have the challenge in this exercise of the new municipal authorities and regional authorities coming in. In South Aegean, the regional authority didn't change, but the municipalities both had new mayors, so that was another added complication. Resource availability, making sure that you have the right resources to develop the DMP. The implementation threats we need to understand, and the difficulties of a plan doesn't mean anything unless you can implement it. So you really need to understand the constraints on implementation, and then obviously changing circumstances during the course of the project can influence your thinking. So these are the final 2 slides. Critical success factors. Critical success factors can be at the level of the destination plan overall, but actually they are embraced within the strategic priorities I talked about earlier. achievement of those priorities, each of them, are really, they are the critical factors in terms of the overall success of the project. But what we're focused on here is the actual implementation activity, because, as I said, the plan's no use if it's not implemented. So what is it you need to do to make sure you have effective implementation? Firstly, a partnership, some sort of board or steering group that is going to drive the whole thing forward on a partnership basis. Commitment of regional and municipal authorities. They have absolutely fundamental role in a whole different range of ways to ensuring that a DMP is successful. The involvement of all of the different sectors of tourism. Ultimately, you're all part of what the visitor experience is, so having you all engaged within the process of planning is very important. That looks remarkably similar to the previous one. Collaboration between key tourism stakeholders, so the key players, airports, ports, roads, infrastructure, utilities, they're absolutely critical in the case of Santorini. This is one of the other pressure points. Really, all of those different elements are key pressure points there, less so in the case of roads. Community engagement and understanding, I touched on that earlier, that there's an opportunity for communities to be involved, to enjoy the benefits of tourism, but also understanding what tourism is about and how they can participate, and just understanding the benefits of tourism in terms of accepting it within the community. Recognition of the role that tourism can play in economic, social, cultural, environmental sustainability. Understanding the role, the positive role of tourism in these respects is fundamental, I think, to getting the buy-in. Adequate funding, obviously, is important, and one of the key points I'd make to you in thinking about preparing the destination management plan is if you've got the plan in place, it makes it much easier to go out and to seek funding. If you simply go and ask funding on a project basis, it's more difficult. If there's a strategic framework for the expenditure of funds, that helps enormously. And then the appropriate skills to implement. And some of those skills you will have in the destination in abundance, others you may need to bring in for the implementation process. So that's essentially the end of the presentation. We're going to go on to this now, are we? Yes, the issues?
Όχι, θα κάνουμε ένα μικρό διάλειμμα, αλλά θα ήθελα όσο είστε έξω να σιγουρευτείτε ότι είστε συνδεδεμένοι με το δίκτυο της αίθουσας. Οκ, ωραία, μπορεί να υπάρχει αυτή η ώστε μόλις γυρίσετε να επιστρέψετε την online πλατφόρμα.